Hello, today I'll be showing you how I make this fairly simple segmented mask. I designed the pattern for them. They're pretty easy designs. I'll put all of the measurements in the description of the video as well. So first you're going to make sure that the paper is folded in half so that you cut two sides of it. I am going to overline all of the lines in Sharpie. And once you're sure that the lines are all nice and even, you're going to want to cut it out. You could cut out just one piece and cut the fabric on fold. I chose not to do that. I thought that would be too much hassle because I want to cut my two fabric pieces at the same time. And so I just cut out the piece of paper on fold. These are the fabrics that I'll be using. I use two different fabrics. I also use this double fold bias tape and this 1/4 inch elastic for the earpieces. It's also important to have a good pair of scissors, specifically fabric scissors, and preferably a sewing machine. So I am lining up both pieces of fabric on top of each other. I have the right sides facing each other. It doesn't really matter because it's symmetrical, but better safe than sorry. And I am marking where the darts will be. I'm not going to cut those out. I'm instead just going to leave it, and I'm going to sew those over later. I find that to be easier than cutting the darts out at the beginning. Here I'm marking the darts on the second piece of fabric, which didn't have them marked initially. Cutting out both pieces of fabric at the same time can be a little bit detrimental sometimes, but I chose to do it. It doesn't matter that much. The pattern as I've shown it so far has actually been upside down, but what's important to remember is that the longer dart is for the chin and the shorter dart is for the nose. Ironing is one of those steps that isn't necessarily essential, but it does add a really important finish to the fabric. I always make sure to iron my projects, usually before and after. With these masks I just did before because it's hard to iron a mask. So here I'm sewing the darts, and once I have the darts both sewn up, I trim the thread and I pin the chin down. I pin it over to the edge in a straight line. I make sure that the nose is in the middle, and then I sew it with a top stitch at 1/8 of an inch. That way it's not too significant, but it does still create that segment that we're really looking for. And this shape is going to be essentially how the mask stays. And then I repeat the process on the other piece of fabric. Now I'm going to line up the two pieces of fabric and make sure that both right sides are facing out and that they are aligned. One isn't going to be upside down. And then to start pinning it, I usually work from either the nose or the chin, right in the center, and then I work out to the edges and then around until I reach back to that point, which is what I am doing here. And here I'm attaching the bias tape. I do first on the top and the bottom, so the longer pieces, and it's not really visible, sorry about that, but I am sewing directly into the crease so that when it folds over it has that really nice finished look. I also prefer to cut my bias tape after I sew it on, typically, which is why you can see it's all sort of hanging off, and then I'll cut it here. If you want a really clean and polished look, you can do a ladder stitch or a slip stitch by hand on the opposite side so that you can't see any stitches on the outside. I chose not to do that because that's a lot more time consuming, and I decided against it ultimately, but you can definitely do that. I would also recommend doing that in the top side if you are planning on adding a wire to it. I chose not to. I prefer not to have wires in my masks, but if you would like to use a pipe cleaner or something to add a little bit of structure, hand sewing it would definitely work. I sewed it shut with a 1/8 inch away from the edge. It does allow for a little bit of the seam to show underneath if you really look for it, but I decided that structurally it's still going to be fine, and so it didn't matter much to me, but every person's preferences are different. And here I'm showing that my machine, the tension was a little bit off, and so I have to trim the thread a little bit. That's a completely normal thing that happens all the time. Just trimming it up and making it look nice is all that it takes. And here I have both the top and the bottom, the bias tape fully attached. I made sure that the seam would be facing down on both sides just to make sure it's a little bit more finished. And now I'm attaching the side bias tape. I'm adding about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch off to the top and bottom so that it has room to be folded over. And here I'm measuring out how long the earpieces should be. I don't really use a specific measurement for this. I just go off of what feels best. I've had the most luck with that. And then I'll add a 1/4 to 1/2 inch just for stability and just in case. And here you might notice I already have one of the earpieces connected. That is because I attached it wrong. I struggled with it a lot. It wasn't necessarily wrong, but it wasn't pretty. And so I actually, after doing this, I went back and redid it. So what I did here was before closing the bias tape entirely, I folded over the edges and I connected it, and I sewed the elastic directly on top of that, and then I folded the bias tape shut and folded the elastic over on top of it so that it would be facing outwards and be really firmly attached. My sewing machine sometimes gets stuck when it comes to really thick areas like this where I had 2-3 layers of bias tape and 2 layers of elastic, what with all the folding. So I struggled with it a little bit, but it wasn't too difficult. It just required some trying. earpieces, I don't like it to be too tight. You could make it longer so that you could tie it off, but in general, I'm talking right now and it's not really moving or sliding. An issue I have a lot with a lot of masks is that they go up into my eyes, which is why I designed the nose dart there, so I don't have any of that here. And it's not, you know, slipping down my chin. Got my glasses on. Here, you can see it's still like this. Again, if you want it to be tighter here, you could change that dart, or you could add a wire up top. I don't really like to have wires in my masks, but you could easily do that. I would recommend a pipe cleaner to use as a wire, and you could put that inside of this piece and just hand sew it shut. But yeah, here's what it looks like this, and then I can take it off. It's a little bit hard with one hand. Flip it around. And it fits exactly the same on the other side, since it is, you know, the same on both sides. The only difference is that on this side you can see a little bit more of the elastic there, but it's a minuscule difference. It makes really no aesthetic difference while wearing it. Yeah. You can switch the bias tape around. You can do two of the same fabric, two totally different colors. It's completely flexible. I personally am a big fan of how it feels. I like that it has this little bit on the bottom so that it doesn't, you know, move around a lot and it stays snug. I like that it doesn't pick up into my eyes. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed.